Okay, family, welcome back to the Gents Making Sense, the space where Black men think out loud, build out loud, and make sense of a world that keeps trying to confuse us. I'm Marvin.
And I'm Sulayman. Today, we're stepping into a topic that's heavy, complicated, and still unfolding. Why the battle with Iran is dragging on. No hype, no fear-mongering, just clarity.
As always, confirm everything with trusted sources. We're here to break down the why, the how, and the what now.
All right, the setup, how we got here. To understand why this conflict is dragging on, you have to understand the architecture behind it. Iran isn't just a country, it's a regional power with deep networks, long-term strategy, and a willingness to observe pain to achieve its goals.
Exactly. And the U.S.-Iran leadership and the U.S.-Iran leadership has been tense for decades. You got the 1979 revolution, the hostage crisis, sanctions, proxy conflicts, cyber operation, nuclear negotiation, and layers on layers.
Most recently, escalations didn't come out of nowhere. They're tied to Iran's nuclear program and disputes over enrichment levels. Proxy groups operating in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. U.S. military presence across the Middle East. Attacks on shipping routes. Retaliatory strikes from both sides.
And here's the key. Iran rarely fights directly. They fight through networks, groups aligned with their interests. That makes the conflict harder to contain, harder to resolve, and harder to measure. And we're going to talk about this segment a little bit because I think most people understand where we are today. What we're trying to understand is why we're still there. That's what we're trying to understand. So let's talk about that for a minute. We've just broken down why we're where we're at and why we probably shouldn't be here anyway. But just tell me what your take is on that, Suleiman.
I mean, it's a little difficult, man, to understand what our goal is, because I don't really see a defined goal or an explanation for why we need to be doing what we're doing. Iran is a country, they have a right to defend their country. They have a right to determine who crosses over their land, their seas, as anybody else. Before this war started, oil was flowing through the strait with no issue. Everybody in the country was bringing their oil through there, and it wasn't an issue. It became an issue, or at least it seems like it became an issue, is because one of our allies didn't like something that Iran was doing. And then we joined in our allies in attacking a country. Once we bombed them and ended up killing all those children, it no longer became just a disagreement. And now it's personal. I mean, you've essentially taken a significant amount of children away from the Iranian people. So it's personal to them now, which is why I think Iran acted the way they did over the last 6 months, which is shutting down the strait, charging extra fees, using their proxies to bomb all over the Middle East. I mean, we're in an all-out war. This is no longer just a conflict. This is an all-out war where we have troops that are being killed. They have troops that are being killed. Infrastructure is being destroyed. So again, as I said, I don't understand the goal here. We had peace before this, and this administration chose to tear up that peace deal. And finally, I'll say this is, Americans need to understand now that why would any country in the world sign any agreement with the United States? If it can be torn up and be destroyed the way the Trump administration did with the agreement that Iran had with the world, why would anybody trust the United States on any agreement that we put on paper?
Good point. But everything you just said leads us into our next segment, which is why is the strategic reality. That's what we got to talk about. Go ahead, Suleiman.
Iran's entire defense strategy is built on indirect warfare. They support groups like Hezbollah, the Houthis, and various military in Iraq and Syria. These groups operate independently but share strategic alignment.
Exactly. So when the U.S. responds to an attack, it's not always clear who to hit. And hitting Iran directly risks a full-scale regional war. Nobody wants. I said that until I'm seeing what's going on now. The last 10 days, I don't know where this is going to lead to now. I kind of had an idea of how it would end up or how it would play out, but right now I don't know because we're hitting them pretty hard for the last 10.
Iran sits in a strategic location, bordering the Persian Gulf, near major shipping lanes, and surrounded by countries where they've built influence.
That influence means the conflict isn't happening in one place. It's happening across multiple countries, multiple actors. That alone slows everything down.
Yeah, I mean, it's a multi-pronged war, and Iran is perfected. I mean, they've learned from the war with Iraq. They've learned from our wars previously, and they're in it for the long run. And I think that's where the not only confusion, but I think that's where our mistakes are coming from, is to think that we're just going to go in and this is going to be over within a couple of weeks, and then somebody's going to put up the white flag, and then we're going to rebuild the country. I mean, this is not World War II. This is not Germany. This is not Japan. You're dealing with a people that have been around for a very long time and fought a lot of battles.
Right? Exactly.
Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Sanctions have hurt Iran's economy, but they haven't broken its political leadership. Iran has adapted, building domestic industries, strengthening ties with China and Russia, and leaning on regional partners.
Pressure without collapse creates a stalemate. Iran can fully advance, but they also can't be forced into submission.
Yeah. And domestic politics on both sides. So in the U.S., foreign policy shifts depending on the administration, Congress, and public opinion. That creates inconsistency.
In Iran, leadership is split between elected officials and the supreme leader's circle. That creates its own internal push and pull. Both sides have political incentives to appear strong, which slows compromise.
Yeah, and I think this is what I was talking about earlier when I was just talking about our reputation and talking about why anybody would trust us. I mean, that's been one of the things that, and although I feel like over the last probably 50 years, we've lost a lot of that because of things we've done as a country. But for the most part, people understood that when the United States was your ally and the United States said they're going to back you, that we would be there for you if need be. And when we signed a document at the United Nations, that most countries would come aboard and say, okay, United States is backing this. We think this is a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
But now, I mean, I don't see it. I mean, our politicians go to the UN, they speak to the world. In a lot of cases, they're laughed at because people realize that it's not legitimate. Our longtime allies, European, are not as solid with us anymore. I mean, one of our biggest allies, Spain, is essentially said we're not supporting you any way, shape, or form in this war. And I think what that does is it puts cracks in our ability of national defense. And national defense is not always militarily. National defense sometimes is political. National defense sometimes is being a good statesman. National defense is the agency that this administration destroyed, USAID, being able to go and help people. Sometimes giving people food and assistance is better than giving people rifles, guns, grenades. So that's a good segment to talk about what I was just speaking about.
Yeah, exactly.
So the nuclear question. Iran's nuclear program is the biggest long-term issue. Negotiations have stalled, trust is low, and verification is complicated.
Yep. As long as the nuclear question is unresolved, the conflict remains open-ended.
Yeah, again, I mean, that's a question, again, I don't understand. I don't understand the nuclear question. We've had a deal that Iran had signed during the Obama administration that the world said was a legitimate nuclear contract between countries. And this administration came in and tore it up. If I'm Iran, I'm saying to myself, if you can have a nuclear bomb, if Israel can have a nuclear bomb, if other countries, Pakistan, India, Russia, China, if all the other countries can have a nuclear bomb for their self-interest, why can't we? So why would Iran come to the table and sign a document with anybody to say we can't protect our country? The United States wouldn't do that. And
Yep.
that's a situation that this administration has put not just the country in, but in the world in. No way in the heck would I, as an Iranian leader or anybody of any country, sign a contract to say that I'm not going to have a nuclear weapon when you can bomb the heck out of me, kill my children, destroy my infrastructure, and I have no way to protect myself.
Crazy.
So,
I mean, we can see the oxymoron in this when you just sign an agreement with Saudi Arabia saying we're going to enrich uranium in your country, which in the future can lead to a nuclear weapon, which Saudi Arabia has said that that's something that they are working towards. Now they have an agreement. Saudi Arabia have an agreement with Pakistan in which Pakistan has agreed, if needed, they will help Saudi Arabia with at least one nuclear weapon and everything. So it ain't like Saudi Arabia. This ain't been something that's been going on for a long time. But in the middle of a war, telling a country that they can't have, and they could, and Iran is a proxy country from most people's standpoint, which is a little different from Saudi Arabia. And I think Saudi Arabia is a proxy country also that don't get enough attention. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 9/11, most of the 9/11 terrorists was from Saudi Arabia, so I don't know for sure. Do you have any knowledge of that, Suleiman?
no, they were
Yeah,
Saudi Arabian. But
yeah,
as you said, I mean, I think the point is you're telling one country that you
yeah,
can't have nuclear bomb because we don't like you.
yeah,
But then you give another country in the same region, nuclear materials to potentially have a nuclear bomb at a later date. So
right?
why does Saudi Arabia get to have a nuclear bomb and Iran doesn't? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, if we're going to try to control the amount of nuclear material that we have in the world, I get that, and I'm on board with that. But that goes for everybody. You can't say that, you're my friend and we're going to allow you to do it. And then to another country, you're not my friend and we're going to allow you to do it. That's not how it works. And basically what you're going to have is a race to a nuclear bomb between, two Middle Eastern countries like you did with Pakistan and
India.
India.
Yeah,
Yep.
and before we get some smart ass come up here and say that don't mean they're going to have a nuclear bomb, because the United States has agreed to put their technology in Saudi Arabia to enrich the uranium and everything. So most people will push back and say, well, it's different from Iran because Iran want to enrich their own uranium, whereas Saudi Arabia is going to allow the United States to enrich their uranium, and which will allow the United States to monitor their program a little bit better. Now, everybody know that that's double talk sometime, and as long as there is somebody in this administration in charge of that, I feel like we're gonna go get smokes and mirrors on all that. So that's why it's important that we get Donald Trump and all his minions out of there in the next 2 years or so, because if not, we'll give Saudi Arabia the whole house if we can. So that's my opinion, though. You can
I
like
think,
it or
I think that's a
you can hate it or
legitimate,
love it.
that's a legitimate walk down the
Yeah,
line. I mean, we know
yeah,
what's going to happen. We
yeah.
know that at some point there's going to be nuclear bombs placed in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, whether they're U.S. nuclear bombs or Saudi Arabian nuclear bombs. They are
No,
going
I'm
to
gonna
be.
say because Israel's going crazy over there right now because Israel don't want Saudi Arabia to have a nuclear weapon either. Go ahead. I'm sorry to cut in.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, because
Yeah.
it's as if some countries feel like they're the only ones should be able to have protection for their country, and I disagree with that. I mean, a lot of times that the weapons that you have is a deterrent. Just
Yep.
like your house. When you have stuff on your outside of your house to tell people, look, this place is alarmed. There are people here to carry weapons, stuff like that. That's a deterrent. An
Exactly.
alarm
Yep.
system. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
a silent deterrent, but
yeah,
it's a deterrent.
yeah, yeah.
So we'll see.
And that's like being in the
So
neighborhood, and the neighborhood saying, "Well, we can have alarm system, but you can't have an alarm system." You know?
right.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
it's different. It's different when the rabbit has the gun, and I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
where we are in the world. Is that
yeah.
a lot of the rabbits around the world are starting to get the gun, and I think it's starting to change. The
Thought
impact
process.
that certain
Yeah,
countries have on others.
yeah, exactly.
All right, so next segment is a human impact. Who's paying the price? Conflicts like this aren't just geopolitics; they're human. Civilians in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Gaza, and Iran feel the consequences.
Displacement, economic instability, interrupted schooling, limited access to health care, and the constant fear of escalation.
And for U.S. service members and their families, deployments and rotations continue. The emotional toll is real.
We always advocate for peace, diplomacy, and the protection of human rights. War is easy to start, hard to end, and even harder to justify when you look at the human cost.
Yeah, and just to touch base on this a little bit, I want to talk about the servicemen and their families, man, because you and I are both
Yeah,
former military, and you know there used to be a time in the United States when there was a appreciation from our politicians and our presidents about service members and the toll that it takes on their families and the potential that they lose their lives defending what we consider to be important. And before we sent them to do something, there were just serious communication that used to go on between our leadership in this country about whether we should do that or not. And I think, and for me right now, it's starting to seem as though that's not important. I mean, we get all the corporate America, and all the fake patriotism, and everybody's for the military. But the reality is that these servicemen that are coming home in coffins, that's real. That's their lives, their families. You got husbands who are leaving their wives, to take care of their children by themselves. Mothers and fathers that are burying their children, and for what? The president used to come out and actually defend or give us a legitimate reason why they felt we should be going into war and why this was important for the United States and our belief system. We don't get that anymore. We just get someone that says, hey, I want to go to war. Let's go bomb the hell out of this country. At some point, you're going to have to put people on the ground. And when you do that, folks are going to lose their lives. And it just does not seem as important for our national leadership when we decide to do something like go to war or bomb somebody or escalate a situation. Real human beings are losing their lives, and young men
right,
who are in their
right.
20s and 30s are losing their lives for what? For what? And that's the concern that I
We
have, in how easily we put our military people's lives in danger.
We're gonna talk about that a little. Well, I'm in my on another note. I will talk about that a little
Okay.
more. But Donald Trump was in Georgia at Marietta this past a couple of days ago. It might have been yesterday, and he had the nerve to let it come out of his mouth that the young man that died, that was from Georgia area, said that one of the last thing he said is Iran can't have a nuclear bomb. That's some stupid shit. That's some stupid shit. How did he know? And if he do, I just don't believe it. I'm just telling you, I don't believe it. This young man is faced with a life death situation, and the thing gonna come out of his mouth is Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. Come on now. How many soldiers or sailors do you know that said something like that when you were in a situation like that?
None.
You're too
None.
busy
And I mean,
concentrating on your job. You
right.
concentrating on your job as a military person, you're concentrating on your job. You're not concentrating on the politics of it all.
Well, yeah, and I mean the question is, what I would ask the president is, there was a program in place to prevent Iraq from developing a nuclear bomb. That was already in place. You
Yeah.
destroyed it. So you can't destroy a policy that was already in place and then turn around and say, I'm not going to allow them to get a nuclear bomb. And That's not an excuse for me. You come to me and you tell me that my son is dead because you don't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard thing to hear as a parent of a military serviceman, that's why my son is in the ground, is because you broke up the initial plan to prevent them from having a nuclear bomb. And now all you're doing is run around saying they're not going to have a nuclear bomb. That's tough. That's a tough conversation for me to hear from, the president of the United States.
Real tough conversation. Let's move on to segment 4, why diplomacy is slow.
One is mistrust. Decades of mistrust make negotiations slow. Each side doubts the other's intention.
Okay, regional complexity. You're not negotiating with one actor. You're negotiating with the whole ecosystem of governments, militaries, and alliances.
Domestic pressure. Leaders on both sides face internal pressure not to appear weak. That slows compromise.
Different goals. The U.S. wants stability and nuclear limits. Iran wants regional influence and sanctions relief. Those goals don't naturally align.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
What keeps the conflict from ending? The conflict drags on because neither side wants full war, but neither side wants to back down.
It's a controlled burn, a dangerous balancing act, a cycle of action and response.
And until there's a breakthrough, diplomatic, political, or economic, the conflict stays in the slow grinding phase.
Yup. And there's not too much else to be said about that.
I know, right?
It really ain't, because that's, in a nutshell, that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to get out of a war, because you got those things grinding against each other and everything. So yeah.
Oh, it takes leadership, and that's what I think that we're lacking in our administration is leadership, competence, people understanding that this is the long game. We're talking about 40, 50, 60, 70 years down the line. We're not talking about right now. I mean, our president is 80 years old. I mean, the reality is that he's probably not going to be around here in the next decade. That means that other people have to come in and deal with this. So you got to think long term. I mean, our president is always talking about he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, this is a good opportunity to figure out how to get out of this mess and potentially get that, because the world wants peace.
Yep.
So figure it out. But you got to have competent people in positions to do that. And we've essentially erased a lot of the people who have historical knowledge of a conflict like this, who understand what our power is, what our limits are, that understand that it's not about my personal feelings, it's about the country surviving. Those people have been pushed out of leadership in the United States, which is why we're in the conflict we're in now.
There you go. What people get wrong. Yeah, this should be good here. People think conflicts drag on because leaders don't care, but often it's because the stakes are too high to move fast.
Or they think one big strike will end everything. But in a networked conflict, there's no single target that collapses the whole system.
Yeah. What to watch next? We're not predicting outcomes, just highlighting factors experts say matter. So these are the factors: nuclear negotiation, regional alliances, economic pressure, proxy group activity, diplomatic engagement from Europe, China, and the Gulf states.
Any shift in those areas could change change the pace of the conflict.
So I guess we can talk about this a little bit in our closing on this segment and everything. Is the conflict is complicated, layered, and still unfolding, but understanding the why helps us make sense of the world we're living in.
No, and as always, we encourage peace, diplomacy, and the protection of human life. War should never be the default.
And before we end our podcast today, I'm gonna go first with the one on another note, because my on another note that deals directly with what we're talking about today. You alluded to it a couple of times. We didn't really have nothing in our script tonight to talk about the leadership portion of it, but like I said, you dived into it a little bit. In my opinion, the impact of inexperienced leadership on war has caused the duration of this war to go on. If you look at who the negotiators are, they're not seasoned diplomats like we've had in the past. We normally have people that are experts in the region that been looking at this region for years on top of years, 10, 15, 20 years. They've built relationships with people in those communities. They know the leaders in those communities. The leaders know them. There's a trust thing there. When you bring in inexperienced leaders and stuff, you will have hiccups like we have here. When top-level civilians and military leaders lack deep experience in strategy, logistics, diplomacy, or combat operation, wars tend to drag on longer, become less coherent, and produce more unintended consequences. Experience at the top doesn't guarantee success, but inexperience almost always increases friction, miscalculation, and delays and everything. As you know, for the last few years, they've been getting rid of or dismissing some of the most senior generals that we have. They've been doing the same thing at the State Department. Hell, we're negotiating a peace treaty or peace, and the Secretary of the State is barely involved. We got 2 unemployed diplomats working, people that don't even work for the government, pretty much. So I'm gonna let you talk about that. I know you got some things to say about that, but I'm gonna tell you what happens with. Well, let me go through. I'll go through my takeaway, and then you can talk a little bit about it if you want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you got this experienced leadership at the top, militarily and civilian, also strategic misjudgment at the highest level happen. Leaders misread the battlefield. And it's safe to say that we've misled the battlefield a few times, talking about we've taken away their total capability and all that other stuff, but yet they fired missiles every day, you know what I'm saying? And drones and stuff. Poor coordination between civilian leadership and military leadership. So I'm guaranteeing you right now that the military leaders don't know who they're supposed to be coordinate with on the civilian side, because normally they coordinate with the State Department. Normally it's the SecDef and the Secretary of State that are coordinating these things that's going on. Not only just the SecDef, but the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. That kind of coordination is not happening right now. The consequences is objectives shift constantly. We've seen that everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we turn around, there's a new objective and everything. Military commanders receive unclear and contradicting orders. Diplomats and military action don't align. Allies get confused. Our allies are so confused now, they just standing back, not doing anything. They just standing back, not doing anything. So the third thing, mismanagement of logistics and sustainment. You can tell that because there's a whole lot of conversations about how much artillery we have left, how much reserves we got going on and everything. Once again, we're shooting multi-million-dollar missiles at these people, and they're shooting $100,000 drones or $10,000 drones and doing just as much damage as we are doing, pretty much, you know? So that kind of stuff happened. The results of not having that kind of stuff slows down because the military literally cannot move, fight, or maintain equipment at the required pace and everything. So we over-rely on technology and single source solutions and stuff. So some of the strikes are not going to be as accurate as they have been in the past and everything. Fifth, failure to understand the enemy's culture, networks, and motivation. Those people that work at the State Department that got those connections are no longer there. We got rid of a lot of them because they didn't agree with Donald Trump's doctrine and everything. Domestic political pressure overrides military logic. And they're feeling the domestic political pressure right now. Every day it's getting worse and worse because gas prices are going back up, goods and services are going back up. And although we had a brief respite in the recession or stuff going up, then it'll be back this week, probably this month. Public opinion swings, media narratives, election cycles. That's a big thing. There's an election cycle coming on. So a lot of time politics make decisions on election cycles and stuff. 7, weak diplomatic integration. We already went over that. 8, mismanagement of escalations. So what you see is an escalation now. When we escalate a war like we're doing right now, there can be mismanagement. We got inexperienced leaders, inexperienced military leaders, inexperienced State Department leaders, and you can mismanage escalation and miscalculate. And I think that's what we're doing now, because we didn't think that they were going to hang on this long. We thought they'd fall off to the wayside. My bottom line, because I know this was long on another note, but the bottom line is lack of experience at the top doesn't cause war, but it absolutely shapes how long a war lasts. It leads to misjudgment, poor coordination, slow adaptation, escalating mistakes, diplomatic gaps, and logistical failures. Thank you. I'll let you get in there.
There's not a whole lot I can add to that, man. I mean, everything you said is 100% true. And, it's unfortunate, man. It's because, all this, DEI and unqualified stuff that this administration put out there at the beginning is exactly what we're looking at now. This is exactly what having unqualified people in positions of authority bring to you. Misjudgment, poor coordination, slow adaptation. We're slow to adapt to the changing war tactics, escalation mistakes. Escalation is a tool that you use when you're trying to defeat somebody. It's not just an overwhelming amount of military escalation. It's pointed, it's directed towards certain things. Diplomatic gaps. This is what happens when you destroy the diplomatic agency of the United States. We don't have people there anymore. We don't have folks that can go to the prime minister or the supreme leader of those countries and go and talk to them about where's the exit for this? That's what USAID did. But when you destroy that because you have personal issues with a few people and you take an agency of 30,000 people all over the world off the playground, you've essentially taken a significant tool away, and you see the consequence of that. And you remember if I said a couple years ago that by destroying USAID, what we're going to see are more wars, more escalation, more of our soldiers being hurt, more people around the world in conflict. And this is exactly what we have right now. Not patting myself on the back. I'm just telling you, from a guy that worked at USAID for 12 years, I knew exactly what was going to happen when you took that diplomatic core out of the equation. Logistical failures. Again, this comes back to competence. You have people in the civilian leadership over in the military that are incompetent. They don't know how to fight a war, don't know how to run a war, don't know how to win a war. And our military is suffering because they're taking orders and recommendations from these people. And again, you hit everything on the head, and we're seeing why having competent, experienced people, regardless of what their color is, competent people to help us run a campaign. And we don't have that. So all the, people, particularly a lot of these white supremacists and, they come onto our comment section, running their mouths about things they don't understand. This is what happens when you put incompetent people or you put someone in a position strictly because of their color or because of their politics. This is what you get. Incompetent administration, incompetent war, somebody who's destroying our economy here in the United States, breaking people from a gas perspective, grocery perspective. This is what happens when you do that.
Yeah, there you go. So, hey, I enjoyed it. Once again, thanks for lunch this week, Sulayman.
We had
a good lunch and everything. So we'll see y'all on the flip side. And until then, stand tall, speak the truth, move like your ancestors invested in you.
Stay woke.
Peace out.
Peace out.